Item 8 brings us to the first item of the day, which is the Auckland Transport Update. I'll welcome Dean, Stacey and Mark Lang and Mark Lambert to the table. And as they're doing that, I'll just make the observation that for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 items, there is quite some substantive information in the attachments. So as much as the agendas are reasonably concise, there is quite a lot of information in the attachments for anyone in the public or indeed councillors. So welcome, Dean. I'll leave you to do the introductions and to crack into the update, and hopefully today we'll have a good opportunity to drill down on some of the specifics of it that perhaps has eluded us a little bit in the last few meetings.
Yep.
There you go, Dan.
Okay, kia ora, councillors, mayor, and members of the public. Thank you very much once again to give you an update from Auckland Transport. And note, we have a full agenda transport related today. Can I just reflect on the presentation regarding electric ferries? Look, we welcome those conversations, okay? New Zealand is very innovative, and we're seeing that innovation come in a technology that is moving rapidly, not just here but overseas. And yes, it is moving fast, which is a good thing. So look, appreciate their input and am aware of what they're achieving in Wellington. What I'd like to propose is next month we give this committee a presentation on what we're actually doing under the banner of Mission Electric. I actually wrote to you, Chair, a week or so ago suggesting that. We would propose to bring our current suppliers, including the ferry ones, just to talk about some of the technology and the route-specific, location-specific design that's going into that. We can touch on the procurement process because I noted a question there, but more importantly, we'll tell you what we're looking to achieve as outcomes for Auckland as emission reduction, decarbonising the system. You might recall this journey started in 2019 when a climate emergency was declared and budget was allocated in partnership with the government to electrify our own fleet across all modes, so that's ferries, buses and trains. And I think it'd be a good time to give you an update on that. That's all I wanted to touch on there. Can we go to our monthly report, please? And I've got the clicker. Yes, of course. Thank you. So we're going to run through a number of things today. We'll try and move expeditiously through that. We'll give you an update on the capital program. We're aware of challenges around medium and small projects, in particular cycling and walkway access, which we will touch on. I've got Kathy here today just to talk about some of the things we're doing around environmental outcomes, sustainability, climate change initiatives. Too often we assume we need a strategy to guide us. We're actually doing some really important stuff every single day and doing this in the way that we design and think and set standards. So that'll be good to get that. We'll touch on maintenance contracts and driver training programs for ferries, and then we'll talk to SOI targets and performance against those, etc. So you can see there's a good program there. Okay. Some recent highlights. So, good news yesterday. We've got the bus driver complement. We've now got what we need, but you'll see as of this report, we were 23 short, so we're back. And that's a huge thank you to all those that have contributed, including Auckland Council and the government. The fee for travel for the Women's World Cup has gone very well. We've had a lot of good feedback, both directly and on social media, so I'm really pleased, and thank you for those that have passed on compliments. I've caught the train and the bus many times. I've had the privilege of going to 4 games, took the kids, all boys I might add, and I can only reiterate what we've got there, that it has gone well. We've done a safety perception amongst staff, and you'll see a comment later in our report around violence and verbal abuse. So it's understanding how they're feeling. Do they feel in control? Have we got the ability to manage a safe working environment for our people and a more tense and socially aggressive Auckland. That's very important for us. So I'm very pleased that we have got such a high participation rate at 58%. That allows us to get very good insight as to what's happening. We have confirmed a parking tariff increase. The minimum fee will go from 50 cents per hour to $1.50, but $1 will be added onto every hour for tariffs above that as well. But the minimum fee currently is 50 cents, and it will go to $1.50. There'll be more communication on that coming, but that's what's been approved. And that's in line with our statement of intent objectives and our commitment through Room to Move. We're also out communicating with Aucklanders around speed and speed management. Some of our challenges coming our way, and you'll be aware of these, but it's worth touching on them. The Kiwi Rail network and maintaining the quality of those assets has been a challenge for Kiwi Rail through lack of funding over many years and many government cycles. It's very important that we support them to get this right, otherwise we'll not get the benefit of the CRL investment. And I'm not saying anything that Kiwi Rail wouldn't say if they were in this room. We need to support them in achieving that outcome. We've resolved the industrial dispute. Well, we haven't, but with some good support from Auckland Transport, the NZ bus dispute is now resolved, so I'm very pleased about that. We'll talk on ferry service provision and risks, and I've already touched on the violence and threats. I'd like to hand over to Mark, and they can choose which one, but I think it's Mark Lang on the capital budget update. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Dean. Good morning, councillors. Just to provide context for these next couple of slides, obviously over the last couple of months, well, back in June, the council had a gigantic hole to fill with a $370 million hole in the operating budget. So virtually all the focus during the annual budget time at that moment was focused on the operating hole, and we didn't really get into the detailed conversation around the capital budget, probably to the extent ideally we would have liked. But I guess now that the dust has settled a little bit, we'd love to be able to sit down and sort of start taking you through what some of the implications are on the AT capital budget, and particularly what it means for certain projects. And off the back of this today was more of a frame-up conversation, as if councillors would like a far more detailed conversation. We're more than happy to bring it into here or into a workshop setting, or link it into the long-term plan conversation. But I guess there's a couple of really key things we want to draw out that were embedded in the council budget doc, but just wanted to really tease out some of the implications. So the first one was that, go back a year ago, we were looking at the phasing of the budgets, and we actually pushed the money out of the coming couple of years into later into the decade, just in terms of the rate at which we could deliver coming out of COVID, the ramp up back to construction of projects after a number had been put on hold for a couple of years. So $128 odd million was pushed out of this current year into future years in the decade. The next bit, just as a reminder, as we went through the budget process, we've had to absorb, and at the moment the estimate range is somewhere in the 125 to 150 million of work this year for flood storm response. And what that practically means is going and building things like new retaining walls, roads at Muriwai, etc., all around the region. So the combination of that money getting pushed out and needing to absorb this flood storm response within our existing budgets, in layman's terms, means there's very little money to start new projects. And that's in this year. And if you can sort of follow me with this one, it's a bit of a leap, but it's the compounding impact for us is that it creates a pinch point in next year's budget, and it's particularly as we roll from one, what we call sort of 3-year NLTP sort of, or government funding cycle into the next, which also aligns to the next LTP, is based, if we start, the real danger for us is we start projects this year, and depending on where the LTP lands or government GPS funding for next year, that we've overcommitted to projects that mean suddenly we've started things that we can't any longer afford. So that's one of the real risks for us. We've been doing significant amount of financial modelling sitting behind it, and what the next bullet really summarises is that if we could actually invest, and when I say invest, this is the money going out the door, up to about 50 odd million extra this year, and up to about 100 million next year relative to the current RLTP and CATA, then we could actually keep a number of mid-sized projects moving. That currently at the moment is uncertain. And we've given some examples here on the list, and the short version is at the moment we can't keep everything on that list going without taking a little bit of risk around that money. What's not written on there is behind the scenes we're doing a lot of work looking at, efficiency around procurement numbers, but also continuing to work with central government to see if we can actually secure other pots of money, whether it's out of the SURF or in some of the latest news is it looks like the funding of Eastern Busway money that we've secured, we might be able to bring some forward. So it takes some pressure off, but we just really want to flag the issues today that if we could actually invest, take a little bit of risk on the upside around how much we commit, knowing that we typically deliver about 95% of the program, there's just a small chance that we actually overshoot this year and next if everything fell into line and we actually delivered everything that we're planning to. On the next slide, and this is just for those that prefer numbers over words, sort of trying to illustrate the same thing in a different way. How you should read this slide is the top line is asset management. There's a lot of work going into resilience and recovery and the obviously flood storm response, plus the other piece around core renewals to effectively fix potholes and road surfaces. The level of committed projects, I guess this is the new bit, is we've probably got the highest level of committed projects we've ever had at the start of a financial year. Principally around Eastern Busway, but a lot of the stuff around CRL, Go Live, Get Ready, to the trains that are on order or overseas, etc. And obviously you can see then we've scooped a number of things into what we call the critical projects on a critical path, but the amount of money then left for the things like cycling and what was the Connected Communities project, so the corridor improvements, there's very little left in the tin relative to what was in the RLTP. So if you're still with me, what we would just want to quickly show you now is do a slight deep dive, because we're getting a number of questions from councillors, communities, stakeholders around what's the status of our cycling projects, and we just wanted to do a little slight deep dive on those in the next 2 slides to sort of say, well, within all that, if there's less money for new projects, what does it actually practically mean for a number of the projects that are out there? And I'll provide some opening comments, and if Mark Lambert would like to add anything at all that I leave out. But what we've got here is this page is the list of stuff that we would like to crack on with in the next couple of years, and you can see at the bottom there's a bit of a funding gap at the moment depending on where other parts of the program land, but essentially like Sir Point Chef to Westmere, we've talked about a lot in the past, that there should be ready to award a construction contract in September. Links to GI, so benefits of linking into the Giada Tamaki Cycleway, Great North Road, which has been discussed, Mangere cycling, Manukau cycling projects, and then the CATA ones, which were essentially, this is starting to break down with the approval of the CATA, what some of those projects are that we'll be looking to deliver across the region. Another way you can think about this is the 23-24, we think we're okay in that year. It's to the extent that these projects span multiple years and start going into that next sort of planning funding cycle, it's the unknown around the amount of money in the 24-25 year. So it's the risk that we commit contractually to things this year that then next year we find we might not have the money as we work through the LTP. So that's the list of, I guess, those what we'd call the ones that are more ready to go. This is the list of other things that we obviously know are critical importance and we would love to be doing as well, but again, they're sort of further down the list in terms of funding, etc. at the moment. And I know we've had some specific questions in around some of these. So obviously stage 4 to Giada Tamaki, obviously critical piece to complete that at some point, but at the moment we don't see it's funded in the next 2 years. The Meadowbank Kohimarama going drive, we would love to crack on and actually do that while the tracks are shut, but again, it's just from a funding point of view, we're not there. We are talking to central government, Waka Otahi, about with their scope to bring some SURF funding into that. And a list of other projects on there. So at the moment, though, if I'm realistic, these projects, unless we can secure some more of that funding from any source, there's a good chance they won't be actually getting construction started in the next 2 years. So I know it's probably a bit of a dampener, but this is the kind of stuff that is the implication of, and we didn't get a chance to rediscuss it in June because we're talking about the significant OPEX issues, but these are some of the implications of, if you sort of frame it back up, needing to absorb all of this flood storm response within the existing budget, and happy to have other conversations with council about it if there's appetite. But, you know, one of the solutions might be some of the money that we pushed out of these couple of years into the back half of the decade. If we could bring a small piece of that back forward, we could actually keep a number of the things on these lists moving. So we'll leave you with that as a thought to ponder, and if there's questions on it later, we can dig into it more if you like.
Sorry, Kathy. Yeah, if that's okay, Mark, thank you. If I can introduce, well, she probably needs no introduction, actually, Dr. Kathy Biebelman. I thought it was really useful for you to hear some of the really excellent things that are happening every single day in the way we design and think about Auckland's environment and addressing all the things that Kathy's going to touch on, so I don't repeat what she's going to say. Kathy, over to you. Thank you.
Morena, and thank you for the invitation. I just want to talk very briefly about some of the climate adaptation work we've been doing at Auckland Transport. We've been focusing on the Ministry for the Environment's approach for how we address this and progress our work, particularly around our coastal and inland hazards. So we're working closely with council staff who are doing the shoreline adaptation planning. To date, they've delivered 5 of the 20 SAPs, or shoreline adaptation plans, and we're building on that information in quite a lot more detail. So we're starting with those that have been completed by council, and now we're going into very specific details around the AT assets in those areas and looking at what should we be monitoring, what are some of the options for addressing it, how quickly are we likely to have to respond, and building that information into our asset management frameworks now and processes. So that's putting us in a good position when we start to look across our coastal asset portfolio and helping us understand now where we should be prioritising work. We're starting, sorry, wrong one. One of them, thanks. We're starting to look now at the inland hazards, and fortunately, or unfortunately, we did manage to accumulate quite an awful lot of evidence associated with landslides earlier this year. We've collated data on around 1,300 landslides on our network, and we're uploading that information into the National Landslide Database to provide a more full picture of what's happening, particularly across the Auckland network, but that information's available to be used nationally as well. This year we're looking to develop a predictive framework using international best practice, and we're looking at a New South Wales framework where they have been able to predict vulnerable slopes and then assessed the adaptation options that could be applied or considered to minimise the impact should they be susceptible to ongoing high levels of rainfall. So we're continuing that work and starting to integrate the work with our utility providers and looking at how our networks overlap and where the utility networks did not fall over in the events at the start of the year, and what can we learn from that. We're starting to share that knowledge now back with council, and more particularly across ACAN, the Aotearoa Climate Adaptation Network, which is a network of local government officials, so that we are able to consolidate the learnings we have in Auckland with those from across New Zealand. I just want to share with you our environment scorecard as well from last year. We're currently collating the data for the past financial year, and that will be out in the next couple of months. But we're presenting annually now a scorecard of our environmental progress. This is in English and also has been translated into Te Reo and is available on our website. In the previous financial year, we had 5 targets in which we have a 10-year work program to deliver. And I'll just touch on a couple, particularly around greening our network, where we're collaborating closely with community facilities and the parks team within council to look at where we plant street trees and how we can improve canopy cover across our network. And that ties in nicely with recent changes, perhaps even in Europe, where the European Parliament recently passed legislation to have a mandated 10% canopy cover across their network. network and streets. Particularly of interest will be around fish passage and biodiversity, and that where we upgrade our culverts, we are removing impediments to fish passage, so to enable those upstream breeding grounds to improve. And managing our discharges is where we treat the runoff from our busiest roads. Partly there's a combination of factors at play in that we were unable to deliver any in that previous financial year. Partly COVID, partly funding, but what we did have was 519 new treatment devices vested to our network through development. So new streets that are being developed are having treatment devices installed on them. I could focus a little on the waste minimisation, and that we've got a really good degree of success there, particularly through our maintenance contracts of our road network, and again on some of the capital programs that are starting to track data for us on a monthly basis now. And we're getting a good level of diversion from landfill, and in particular we're looking to encourage the use of recycled materials. But I'm happy to take any questions on that later. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy, and good morning, councillors, Mayor. We've received a number of requests for a little bit more information on how we manage our maintenance contracts. So I'll spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about this in a little bit more detail that's on the slide. So we've got 8 road corridor maintenance contracts. They bundle both maintenance and renewal activities to get economies of scale out of those contracts. 6 are on the mainland, and we've got 2 smaller island contracts as well. Now they include everything with regards to maintenance renewal activities, so reactive, routine, the programme roadworks that we do, both on the road and on the footpath. It includes obviously things like pothole repairs and the resurfacing of the road, the rebuilding of the actual road structure, and things such as traffic sign and road marking maintenance, and curb and channel repairs and renewals as well. We've also built into these contracts emergency response. So every time we do any emergency response, whether it's to major weather events as we've seen earlier in this year, or the ongoing response to more smaller incidents, it's all based on competitively tendered unit rates. So we're getting good value out of those contracts for everything we do, whether it's emergency or planned. We have also built into these contracts, which were competitively tendered over the last 2 years, the ability to add standalone one-off capital works as well. So, for example, we are looking at the moment, or we have just awarded some work on the GI linked cycleways, which are through our road maintenance contracts without having to go through another procurement exercise, because we've already got very good tendered unit rates in there, and we can actually align it into some of our maintenance works and get even more economies of scale through that alignment as well. These contracts do exclude, however, things like street tree maintenance, roadside mowing, weed spraying, catch pit cleaning, which is all undertaken through Auckland Council contracts. We've also taken the opportunity to align these new 8 contracts geographically with local board boundaries. We haven't done it yet, but what we will be doing is reporting performance against those contracts in local board areas or cumulative local board areas. The contracts have terms of 5 plus 5 years, so the second 5-year term is discretionary on performance, on our award of that second part of the term. And we've utilised the New South Wales model called collaborative maintenance partnerships, which effectively is enhancing how we used to do road maintenance, which was very much a supplier-client relationship, into more of a partnership relationship with the contractors. Like I say, we've recently competitively tendered all these contracts, and we've seen a reduction in unit rates compared to previous contracts, and we got very good competition for each of those. And in fact, a number of our contractors bid for a number of different contracts, and we purposefully prevented some of our contractors from gaining more than 2 or 3 individual contracts. I think we also received a bit of a request in terms of how practically do these contracts work and how do we work with our suppliers. So in principle, at the start of each financial year, aligned with the budgeting process, we set the nature and the amount of work required under each contract, The contracts allow us to be variable. They're long-term contracts. We can award no work in a contract, or we can award hundreds of millions if we choose to. So it's all based around the demand, the requirements, and what's actually set out in our funding and our priorities. The renewal programs, they're developed by Auckland Transport. They're not developed by the contractors. They're based on the asset management plan, so it's all fact-based, and it's based on asset condition assessments which Auckland Transport undertake independently of the contractors. Of course, we pass the required renewal work on to the contractor to do the programming and phasing of the work itself. The maintenance work programs are slightly different, and the contractors are the ones who are out there on the roads all the time, so we work very closely with them to set priorities around the maintenance activities. In terms of all work that's done, whether it's maintenance or renewals, we do quality monitoring. Contractors are not paid for the work that's defective, and contractors are required to either re-perform that work, or if we're sufficiently unsatisfied, we can approach other contractors at their cost to do it. With the exception of some fixed costs, which are mostly corporate, all work is paid, or most work is paid on the basis of volume, so it's largely measured in value. We only paid for work that's actually done, and importantly, it's all based on the competitively tendered unit rates that we've gone through the market in the last 2 years on. And just finally, in terms of how we manage those contracts, as I've mentioned, they're collaborative performance-based contracts, which are based on New South Wales, which is considered to be some of the best practice in the world. They have performance frameworks within them. There's reward and abatement KPIs, which are linked to finances as well. And those 5 key result areas being customer, safety, sustainability, value for money, and collaboration. We have monthly contract management meetings with every supplier, and we hold 3 monthly governance meetings, which are at a higher level within both AT and within the suppliers themselves. And we bring all suppliers together regularly to share knowledge, innovation, technology, etc. So I thought that might just give you a little bit of understanding of how we manage the contracts. I've got nothing more to say on that, but I'll hand over to Stacey, who will talk through ferries.
Good morning, and so whilst we shared some really good news about our bus driver shortage now being resolved, we still very much do have